Ymedia Group, the fastest growing media group in North America.
Hello and welcome to Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh, and here are the latest when it comes to business news. Well, we know that the auto industry has been severely hit since President Trump took office last year, and when talks of tariffs and not just that, but President Trump essentially, his whole thing when it came to electrical vehicles and saying, drill, baby, drill, in terms of having gas consuming vehicles and not so much the electrical vehicles. And so that essentially set back a lot of the trajectory of what was already in play when it came to electric vehicles, not for when it comes to Tesla, that has its own ambitions, which I will cover. But when it comes to news for Canadian EV plan, essentially now Honda is reportedly halting its plans for the massive $15 billion EV production project here in Ontario, essentially dealing a massive blow to Canada's electrical vehicle strategy and manufacturing ambitions that was set in place. If you recall, this project was first announced in April 2024, so not that long ago, 2 years ago, and it was expected to become one of the largest EV investments in Canadian history, centered around new battery plants, expanded vehicle productions in Alliston, Ontario. Essentially, since President Trump's announcements and him taking office for his second term and what it meant for drill baby drill and gas guzzling vehicles and not electric vehicles, it essentially weakened the EV demand, right? And then you had the U.S. tariffs uncertainty, and of course, CUSMA review that's around the corner. The broader industry essentially shifted back towards, before electric vehicles. Do you remember hybrids, where you could put some gas in and the rest is a hybrid because, it becomes, it's able to do, remember the Prius, that was like one of the first, the Toyota Prius, one of the most popular hybrid vehicles. So now these auto manufacturers essentially said, okay, well, if the electrical vehicle demand isn't there and it's weakened because of laws, because laws create it, right? In terms of public demand as well, because you also have to invest in the infrastructure to be able to support electrical vehicles. Like I've driven from Toronto to Los Angeles. I've driven through Central America, and then I drove from British Columbia to Toronto and all the way to Quebec City. And I promised you, if I had an electrical vehicle, then I would have to figure out what to do in terms of how many miles or how many kilometers I could go. And, and that's in those situations, you're very grateful of having, a gas car, right? But EVs are great for in city, right? Because inside of certain cities, they have EV stations and the support of that. So that's the case. So now, because of the weakened demands, of course, the U.S. tariffs, the uncertainty, the broader industry shifted back to hybrids and essentially forced automakers to rethink what is this aggressive electrical vehicle expansion plans. And now Honda is backing out on it. So the original investment was $15 billion Canadian, which is 11 billion USD for EV hub in Ontario, Alliston, Ontario. And the planned production was up to 240,000 EVs annually by 2028. So can you imagine, like it feels like halfway through 2026. So imagine like almost 250,000 EVs annually by 2028. So those were great numbers. Battery capacity of 36 gigawatts per hour annually. And then when it came to job impacts, well, those numbers, right, was retaining the 4,200 existing jobs and adding another 1,000 new jobs. The government support that was stepped up by Ottawa and Ontario at the time, we have a picture, if you recall, it was under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Premier Doug Ford. They did this massive announcement, and the investment was roughly $5 billion. There you go. Go full picture, because this is like a memory of 2 years ago when they went, and the Premier Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, and then you had Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So prior to Mark Carney, and then you have Krista Freeland, who was possibly at the time Deputy Prime Minister, right, making this massive announcement, right, for what would have been this EV production project in Ontario, $5 million from the province, from the federal government going towards this incentives. And now Honda is pulling back, right? They're saying the demand's not there, right? They're saying North American EV demands have weakened significantly, like we're talking about sharply, not just like on edge, but we're talking about a massive shift. Consumers are shifting back towards what would be a hybrid, right? Hybrids are low-cost vehicles, right? When you think of the Prius, right? It's low gas consumption, and then especially with these gas prices, but then you have the hybrid aspect of it, that it would be able to stretch it out longer. And then you also didn't need to plug it in, right? You didn't need to have that aspect of it. And then, of course, the Trump tariffs, right? That the policies have increased manufacturing risks. And Honda's estimating that this tariff could hit profits up to $650 billion yen, which is approximately $4.4 billion USD because of the tariffs. And Honda, obviously, because it's a Japanese car, so therefore this is what they're estimating. And Honda's not alone, so that actually affects the entire industry-wide effect, which is you have General Motors, Ford, Nissan, Stellantis have all slowed down their EV investments. Honda has canceled several North American EV models and shifted focus towards their hybrids. So what does that mean? This is a huge situation for Canada, as Canada's EV strategy has taken a hit. This was supposed to be really big. Canada was supposed to be the engine of electric vehicles. If you recall, it was supposed to be able to provide the critical minerals to be the engine and the drive towards the future of EVs. And because of that, Canada did heavily invest. And when it came to the North American EV manufacturing hub, battery supply chain leaders, and those were all taxpayer dollars that went, and things change. As you can see, elections change, politicians change, and the narrative changes in terms of, but I think this war that we're seeing take place in the Middle East with Iran, and that's affected gas prices, I think we're going to start rethinking in terms of our reliance on oil. I think that's going to be definitely top of mind, which is why, I'm going to talk about this next thing. But in terms of the investments, you had government pledges in billions in subsidies, such as tax credits, direct support, infrastructure incentives. When it came to the Ontario government, they also supported it. Ontario manufacturing concerns are massive, because we're seeing this, when it comes to long-term auto sector competitiveness, and to be able to have a future industrial investment certainty to make sure that we keep the auto plants, we keep those jobs for Ontarians. This is all at a time where it's potentially very high risk. And so now automakers are showing what would, this transition from EVs and moving towards hybrids, flexible, which creates flexible production. And it's a low risk investment because they're not going towards the future of the car. So now this EV transition, I'll talk about that car in a moment. So the EV transition is continuing, but now it's slower and more unevenly, whereas before it was this ambitious target to be able to hit, like, think about it, 240,000 electric vehicles a year by 2028 in terms of the Ontario strategy, right? And so this news in North America, here in Canada, is coming at a time where China is actually taking hold of this EV market. So China is essentially becoming a very dominant player in the global EV market, with new forecasts showing Chinese automakers could capture about 56% of the global electric vehicle market by this year. That's significant for China to be able to capture 56% of the market. And it's essentially reinforcing Beijing's dominance on the industry, where you can get an electric vehicle from China, and you can get a few of them, like 3 to 4 compared to what you would pay for just a normal North American made sedan here in North America. So very competitive. At the center of the growth of this, Chinese EV strategy is BYD. It's reported about 321,132 vehicle sales just this month alone. Not this month, sorry, in April alone. So that's about 320,000 vehicles in just April alone. We do have some of those BYD cars that we can start showing. The orange one that you just showed, that's a BYD car. We have actually a few that we can show you. So this is significant because these oversales numbers are staggering. When it comes to overseas sales, it's surged to a record of 134,542 units. So we know that this is huge. China's no longer, just providing manufacturing for certain goods. It's actually, it had the auto show, and it was just, if you are to just, when you get a chance to go online, take a look at the Chinese vehicles and their auto show, and you're seeing those types of vehicles that are Chinese manufactured vehicles. They look good. And it's like the Chinese understand what North Americans want to drive. So when you look at SUVs like that, you're like, oh, that's very attractive. That's comparable, looks comparable to what North Americans are used to. But then you have the whole electric vehicle component to it. And of course, that means savings when it comes to an SUV like that would be a massive gas guzzler. And of course, you'd be paying premium gas to be able to fill that tank. And mind you, now that's an electric vehicle. So now China's no longer just the world's largest EV producer. It's increasingly becoming the global standard for setting for electric vehicles, right? So you can go full screen. You can see some of these very beautiful cars. So here are some stats that I want to cover with you. Is China is expected to hold about 56% of the global pure EV market share by this year. BYD April sales are 320,000 vehicles sold. Overseas, BYD sales are 134,000 vehicles. That's 71% increase year over year. Other Chinese EV markers are other vehicles such as Zeekr. They have some cool vehicles. We can show some of those. There you go. Delivery so far has been 31,787, so roughly about 32,000. Then you have Xpeng, and that they have about 31,000 vehicles there. So this is Chinese automakers. They're building their cars faster. Their vehicles are built faster. They're producing cheaper batteries and scaled production aggressively. This has been backed by their government backing of years of subsidies, tax incentives, industry policy. It's really helped China dominate the EV supply chain. And you have Chinese vehicle firms that are rapidly expanding into Europe, Southeast Asia, Middle East, Latin America. We know that BYD is coming here to Canada. 20 different dealerships are going to be opened across Canada. And this is part of the deal with the Prime Minister that went over to China to be able to do this, which President Trump reacted strongly to, because if those vehicles enter the American market through Canada, you can see the massive competition that that's going to be there. And this is fierce competition inside China as well when it comes to consumption of these, because there's brutal price wars and shrinking margins and slowing profits, because you can see, like, I'm just showing you 3 different vehicle brands. There's so many more in the Chinese market. So there's the domestic supply that's peaking, and then of course there is the overseas electric vehicles that are expanding in the marketplace. So massive time for Chinese automakers at a sad time when we hear about how Honda is rolling back on what Ontario's strategy is. So that means the Prime Minister has his job cut out for him to be able to diversify Canada and make it a leader in specific industries that we're seeing China make themselves a leader by taking 56% of the market share when it comes to electric vehicles. And that's just this year, and that's growing because this is a rapid thing. So when we say, when you hear who won the war, you can say that even though China has not been involved in the war that's been taking place between US, Israel, and Iran, China has been doing quite well when it comes to this specific sector as well. That's all the time we have for Ymedia Newsroom. I'm Ramona Singh. Until tomorrow, take care and be well.